Today we're going to bridge the divide between the old and the slightly less old. On the left here we have an AT&T Merlin telephone system, which first came out in 1983. This could be called a hybrid system, meaning an analog POTS line comes in. So that's the old analog telephone system we all remember from back in the day. But internally it is digital. So you just use regular old Cat5 cables to hook the phones up to this thing. The phones can dial one another, so this can act as a totally closed phone system for something like a small or medium business. And they can also make and receive calls from the telco provider line, assuming you have one. They also have a very iconic ringtone that you may remember because these things were absolutely everywhere in the late 80s into the 90s. On the right, we've got some Cisco IP phones from the early to late 2000s, which also have a very recognizable ringtone. These are not analog phones. They are entirely digital, and by that I mean they wouldn't know what to do with a POTS line if you tried to plug it in on the back, and are in fact meant to interact with software hosted somewhere on an Ethernet network. In a previous video, I got this Cisco 2801 router running Cisco Call Manager Express. That software allows these IP phones to call one another. In this video, I'm going to install this 4-port FXS card into this Cisco router. This little card can actually provide POTS dial tone and will allow the router to act as a bridge between the old and newer worlds we have on the bench here today. So let's see if we can't get these AT&T Merlin phones from the early 80s talking to these Cisco IP phones from the 2000s. We'll start by installing that special module that's going to give us a dial tone for the Merlins. Let's get into it. FXS stands for Foreign Exchange Station. An FXX port can provide dial tone and can be thought of as the telecom provider. There's also FXO devices, or Foreign Exchange Office. An FXO can be thought of as a phone. The FXO receives service while the FXS ports provide service, what I'm dumbing down by simply saying they provide dial tone. So that's just a little word of warning if you're going to buy this gear and do it for your own use. While these look nearly identical, you're almost always going to want the FXS cards to do anything interesting. But these older IP phones are a little tricky. You can power them over their Ethernet cable, but they use something called inline power. You can also give them a 48-volt DC barrel jack, but we're not doing that. That would be incredibly boring. The inline power this thing wants and standard power over Ethernet coming from something like, say, my modern Ubiquiti switches in the rack in the other room aren't compatible. Inline power was an early proprietary Cisco only thing. For that reason, I've got an era-appropriate Cisco 3500XL inline power switch over in the retro rack. So what we're going to do is install this FXS card into this router locally here. I think I called it a 2801. I think it's a 2821. We'll find for sure when I flip it around and then power it on. Then we're going to have to go on a little infrastructure cleanup journey. I've got a trunk of Cat5 cables coming from the retro rack into the workshop here. I send both Ethernet and traditional POTS phone lines over these cables. And the idea here is we're going to rack this thing up in the retro rack, and I'll have some lines for the IP phones with inline power coming into this room, and also some analog telephone lines coming over to this guy, and then we'll figure out the bridging. In fact, you can break a regular old, Cat5, 5E6 cable, whatever, into 4 individual phone lines. I like to make these little adapters like this, but I didn't label any of these cables. It's always a massive hassle to experiment or change things around, so I'm going to use this as an excuse. We'll locally, in the workshop here, get this installed, make sure this router likes the FXS card, and then we'll bite the bullet and get everything labeled for ease of use in the future. We'll make sure these IP phones are working just fine. Then we'll fire up the old Merlin system, make sure it's healthy, and finally dive into the Cisco config for this guy to see if we can get it bridging calls between the Merlin phones and the IP phones back and forth. I'll get some of the phones out of the way for now. We'll install this, fire up the Cisco router, and then get to work. This thing is indeed a Cisco 2821 router. These 2800 series routers are very powerful. They can do a lot of different things. I suspect a lot of them are still in service, but it's kind of to the point where a company can't really justify running something this old anymore, which is the home labber's dream, because you can kind of get them for a good price, in my opinion. Comes with 2 1 gig onboard Ethernet NICs and then a bunch of expansions. So these things are called HWIC ports, and this is a HWIC for FXS Card. I'm going to put it in HWIC slot 0 here. I don't always screw them in, but we'll just do it by hand. It's not like they're going to fly around anywhere anyway. So we'll get that installed, and then we'll flip it around and power it on. Got a power cable on this thing. This is the serial port console for local administration. Cisco uses this RJ45 jack. I think there's another name for that jack. Everyone gets all pedantic about it. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. This is going to my Windows computer just a few feet away. All I want to do is make sure that FXS card, it's happy with it, and then we're going to go rack this thing up. So this thing has like variable speed fans, so it starts up kind of loud, then kind of settles down once it realizes the temperatures are healthy. It would help if there was actually power to that outlet. There it goes. It's booting up. In my experience, these 2800s take quite a while, and by that I mean like 1 to 3 minutes. So this is good. The thing seems healthy. Let's just make sure it recognizes that FXS card before we rack her up. We're booting into iOS here, the software that runs on these Cisco machines, and you probably can't tell, but it's about a third as loud now. It has the fans on full tilt when it starts up, presumably does a bunch of temperature checks and decides everything's cool, and then it really, really revs them down. It's pretty nice. I don't know, 40 seconds later it's still booting, but I already know what I need to know. So it'll show all the hardware when it boots up. Yeah, it's complaining about a bunch of lines that are down in its configuration. Anyway, it was already showing me. So let's do a show inventory. And right there, 3rd generation 4-port FXS card. This thing likes the card. Let's rack it up. Okay, this thing's doing good. Turn her off, and I was digging through my rack ear bag, and I have the Cisco 2800 rack ear set, I think, for this guy. I like to tape them up with painter's tape, and then I tape the screws up in there. Otherwise, I would just totally lose them, and then you label them. That's the way to go. I even had all 8 screws. It will never cease to amaze me that these pretty heavy and very long devices can be held up by these relatively small rack ears. Before we go on this journey, I thought it might be useful to give you some physical context about what's going on here. So the workbench, I have the workshop, and I've got the server room. The server room is actually a furnace room that has extra space that I put server racks in. So in the workshop, what I'm calling the workshop over here, I'm in there now. The bench you're looking at is right here. And when I'm at the desk, I'm looking at the Cisco configs or whatever, I'm sitting right here at this desk. It's roughly this shape, and in between me and the server room are stairs. So I can walk out of the workshop out this door, and these are stairs that go upstairs. And I have access under the stairs through here. That's where that yellow bundle of cables is. That yellow bundle goes from here over to here through some holes I put in the wall. Then this is like the rest of the basement. This isn't exactly, it's not to scale and it's not entirely accurate, but that's the idea. So I'm over here, I'm standing right here, and the server room is over here. It's like 10, 15 feet, maybe. Visually, I don't know if that helps or not. I don't really feel like filming my whole house for you. So that's what's going on. I'm filming in here. The servers are over here, and we got 10 or 15 feet right here. And that's where that yellow bundle of cables is. Let's go walk into this room and rack some stuff up. Here is the main RetroRack network infrastructure. This is a terminal server that gives me serial access to all of these. So like we were just on the serial port locally on that machine, I can do that over Telnet with all this stuff. This is the main network infrastructure. This is the router. This is a Cisco 7206 VXR, my favorite thing I own. And then we've got a 3550 series AG switch. This is a 1 gig aggregation switch. Can't imagine how much this would have cost back in the day. This is a 3550 just 100 megabit switch with the 1 gig uplinks. They're giga stacked. If you want to know more about that, go check out my other videos. Then we got a patch panel, and then this guy down here is the inline power switch. So those are the cords we need going back to those IP phones in the other room. In terms of where we're going to put this 2821, I think I want to put it right here. This used to be the main power distribution for the rack. All it's doing now is literally this light on top of the rack, so that I can film and see better in here. Well, probably just move it up here for now. We'll figure that out later, because I installed a 240 volt PDU on the back of the rack, and that's actually powering all this network infrastructure, and that's what we're going to plug probably this one and the other one into. This guy is doing dial-up stuff. It has not been integrated into this network. This network is a 10.0.0 network. That's the RetroRack network. This guy doesn't know anything about that. We'll do that eventually. It's actually got a really cool card on the back with 8 modems, and then another fancy FXS card, just 4 voice lines, but it's going over this Amphenol cable. You'll be seeing more of that in the future. We're going to remove this, put it higher so I can switch my light, and then we'll get the 2821 put in here, give it 240 volt service. I'll wire all that up and I'll be back. There is an art to all of this data center rack stuff, and I definitely don't have it, especially when it comes to power distribution and internal management distribution. So I totally forgot. This is one of those oddballs. Even while I was racking up, I didn't realize. The power and the serial console that we were using earlier comes off the front, but I figured it out. This serial console cable goes to this terminal server, so I'll be able to use this port with the RetroRack network over Telnet. And then I installed one of these just rack hooks that come with the rack. So I've got that routed that way, and that's going to work out pretty nice. I think in general came out pretty good. It's got a direct 1 gig uplink to the aggregation switch here, which wasn't necessary at all, but I try to put individual network appliances aggregated directly into this switch and have clients coming off the slower switches. I think that's how you would do it in a real data center anyway back in the day. And then I've got this awkward situation where this thing is a U1/2. A U is a standard rack unit. Most things fall on an even rack unit number. This is a U1/2. And so I've got this awkward situation here, but I'm using it to my advantage to route cables back to the other stuff off the aggregation switch. Otherwise they'd have to come out the sides, so that's okay. On the back, I've got the router we just racked up plugged into port 6 of my 240 volt PDU. That's going to power most of this rack. Everything PDU is powered up, but all the ports are off right now. I'll show you how I have to remotely trigger those in a moment. And then it's coming up this existing loom of cable and heading up. Now, some folks asked, and it was a good question, you know, like, why do it this way? You can't put a side on the rack, and you wouldn't normally do it this way. This is just for convenience. I'm never going to put a side on this rack. This rack is, I shouldn't say never, but it's probably never going to be next to another one. So this just makes it easier to loom up and make everything tidy. And then of course that flows up into that little hook I was showing you along with the console cable. This is the terminal server, and it's got what's called an octopus cable coming off the back with 8 serial ports. So I can control up to 8 devices with this. I think I'm up to number 6 now. So that's looking pretty good. This is the one we just put in. This does dial-up stuff. It's amazing to see this filling in. I still got my little light switch. I just threw that up there for convenience. Don't know if it'll stay there. When I bought this rack, I think it's a 42U rack, I never thought I would ever fill it. And now it's almost full. And I almost need another one. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there. This is looking really good. If you recall my little diagram about how this yellow bundle of cables is getting into the room, that main trunk that's all loomed up and wire tied is the main bundle. And then you can see I've got these others that I've just kind of ad hoc thrown through for POTS lines and individual lines to the retro rack and stuff like that. I don't actually know what's going on the other end. I didn't label either end. So I'm going to tackle that, and I'm dreading it, absolutely dreading it. It's going to be a huge pain in the ass for reasons you'll see. But first, let's get the retro rack powered up, and we'll see if we can interact with our guy here, make sure everything's cool. Then I'll deal with my yellow cable situation, and finally we'll get to do some phone stuff. I keep a spreadsheet of all the infrastructure in the retro rack, the IP, oftentimes the physical port it's plugged into. Clearly I haven't been very good about keeping track of that. And in a previous video when I got these IP phones working, I already named this thing Phone Router 1. Its terminal server port is that. We'll go over that in a second. And as you saw, it's got power port 6 now. So I highly recommend, if you've got what I'm doing, definitely keep track of it. It really, really helps. Well, let's talk about how we actually power this stuff on. So that PDU I was showing you in there, that power distribution unit, is switched, meaning I can remotely interact with it. There is a web UI. Actually, this will probably be a better starting point. So that PDU is on, and it is connected to my home network. 192.168.122 is its IP. I use my home network to sort of bootstrap the whole operation, and then I can power on the retro rack. This computer that I'm recording this on now can access both networks. That's actually kind of a novel thing. for someone like me who's like a layman in networking. So if you want to know about like one computer connecting to two networks, let me know. I've done that several times in videos, but I've never covered it in detail. But I can go control these outlets. So I can like turn on that outlet that we plugged that thing into. This is one way with the UI, which is nice. But that PDU supports something called SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol. It is a protocol. You could sort of think of it like HTTP at the highest level. I can get and set information on the PDU. I can get the status of outlets. I can set the status of outlets, meaning on or off. And I wrote this little app, which is pretty sweet. I mean, I kind of wrote it. And here it's showing me the status of every outlet. That router is plugged into outlet number 6. Let's bring it up on the screen here. And if I press enter, I can't tell because I'm in here, but presumably the lights are turning on, which is great. And so I can remotely control each outlet from here. There are no physical buttons on the PDU. That's the problem here. So I can do it from this little app I've written. I mean, I wrote some of it. And then if we're looking at the rest of the network infrastructure, I can turn that all on one at a time. And now the RetroRack network is coming up. Let's see if we can interact with our new router. As always, first things first, I think that thing is sitting at 10.0.0.6. Let's try to ping it. We can reach it. And then the terminal server I keep talking about with that octopus cable, I can telnet to that at a specific port. And in our case, it's going to be 2006. So it's 2001 through 2006 for all the items in the rack. And remember, phone router 1, the router we're concerned with today, is at 2006. So we can telnet into that. And here we are at phone router 1. And show run, I guess. This is the current configuration of this thing. We're gonna be messing with this a lot. So that is good. Now let's go do the crappy part, which is labeling all the cables so that I can get the phones in here. Hi, welcome to Under My Stairs. As you'll recall from the architectural diagram I showed you earlier, we're right here. We've got this patch panel right here, and that yellow trunk is coming in that is going across to the server room. On that side of the wall is the workshop and the workbench that I've been filming on. And I've got this patch panel here, and because, you know, that's just this kind of thing I like to do. So basically I need to label all of these, and that's what I'm going to do now. Just for reference, I guess, that is the main trunk coming down of the yellow cables. And then I've got a bunch of bonus cables, you know, ad hoc as I've needed them, because I didn't label these ones. And the way I'm going to do this is with this Klein Tools LAN tester. So the deal is you plug one end, I think you can do phone lines as well. Plug one end of the cable there, and the other one here, and then you press the button, and RJ45 green means everything is cool. I'm going to go do that at least 16 times. So I'll plug this in to one end near the patch panel I was just showing you. I'll use this thing in here on the other end of each of these cables. And what only long-time viewers will know is that all that crap actually goes into another Ubiquiti switch, which is clearly relatively underutilized. And what really sucks is I bought these monoprice cables off, well, monoprice obviously, but there was some deal on them or something, and they just suck. It's like really hard to get them out of a plug, a receptacle. Like, this is not doing it justice. It's like insanely hard to unplug these out of an actual network appliance. Anyway, this is probably more than you want to know because you probably care about the phones. I'm going to get rid of this thing. I don't need that thing. I've got a way bigger 48-port Ubiquiti switch on the front that is more than enough for everything that's going through here. What is that? 6 critical cables. Anyway, I'm going to go get to work, and I'll be back with the results. It's the next evening, and I have all the cables labeled, so I know which end goes where in the patch panel. I actually split the trunk into 2 pieces, which was much harder than it sounds. Some ports going to the home lab rack, and some going off to the retro rack. I don't know what possessed me to make these cables so long years ago when I put them in, but it's paying off now because the lines can actually reach all the way up into the retro rack with plenty of slack. Then I also took the opportunity to kind of clean up a bunch of loose cables on the floor. I know it doesn't seem like it, but it's a lot better in here. I've got a phone line plugged in to a port on our new FXS card, and that port I was just showing you runs right here at the end of the day. And we should get a dial tone, even though that port isn't configured yet. And we do. Got the IP phones out. I think I misremembered earlier. These slightly newer ones take normal PoE. These older ones actually want that inline power coming from the special switch in the rack. That's what we're going to use today, I think. And then no surprise here, I've got a couple of ports giving us that inline power. These guys are booting up. It takes a few minutes for them to get their IP and grab the configuration from that 2821. These are the extension numbers on the system. So if I pick up this and call 101, this one will ring, vice versa. And we'll probably set the Merlin up in the 200 range, so probably just 200. Let's make sure these boot up, make a couple calls, and then we'll see if the Merlin stuff still works. A few minutes later, these guys are booted up. You can see they know they're connected to Cisco Unified CME. They think they know the time and date. That's a little off. I never set that right. And they each know their own extension number. Now, we'll pick up this one. Trust me that there's a dial tone, and we'll dial 101. And it's insanely loud. There we go. We have a call. And of course, we can go the other direction. Turn that down before I do this. There we go. These guys are working just fine. I know I'm breezing through that. I actually have a full video where I go from 0 to having these working and doing this stuff. I'll link to that down in the description if you're interested. Now let's deal with the Merlins. Make sure this thing's still working. Got my telco provider line. It doesn't do anything, but it should provide us a dial tone we can hear. And I've got one phone plugged in. Let's turn this thing on. I can see we got a green power, red on here. Pretty sure if I pick this up, I'll hear the dial tone. And we totally do. I'll tell you what, nothing is better than just slamming one of these bad boys down. Can't really hang up on anyone anymore. They're made of plastic, but it's nice plastic, and they've got these heavy metal bases, at least the older ones. So yeah, it doesn't really go anywhere. Pretty sweet. Man, exciting. I guess let's look up another one. I'm running out of Ethernet cables. Look at this relic. What is this? Category 5. I thought it was going to be older than that. Where did I even get this thing? It's pretty nice that you can just use regular old Ethernet cables to hook these Merlin phones up. I believe that was actually one of the selling points. Didn't have to use a lot of fancy cabling, and you didn't have to wait for someone from the Bell system to do it for you. Okay. Yeah, this one also has dial tone. I can't remember how to call them. I think this one starts, they're labeled 0 through 5. I think this one starts as phone 1 though. Let me remember how to do it. One of these buttons is like intercom. Yeah, okay, I did it. Yeah, these have a call now. So you press, they called it intercom intercommunications, I guess. So what I did there is I pressed what's known as the intercom button. It beeps. I get this kind of like crappy ringtone in the background. And then this is phone 1. And it just beeps like that. And now they have a call. I guess this is phone 0. Let's try that. I believe that's the intercom. It's just not labeled. Yeah. Whoa! Sorry about that. That one picked it up on speaker or something. Anyway, cool. Okay, so that's nice. They each work, but they're 2 independent systems. This is a hybrid system, and its only access to the outside world is through this telecom line, and these guys can only talk to each other. Now the pain really begins. We need to teach that Cisco router to allow analog calls coming over this line, plugged into the back of that FXS port, to be able to call these phones. So I'm going to set that FXS port up with its own phone number, I guess. We'll call it 200, I think. Now all of these have the same phone number. There's only one line coming in, and then internally they each have different extensions. By default, if I get my configuration right and one of the IP phones calls the number 200, they're both going to ring. because you're in like an office and you're waiting for someone to pick up the incoming call. Now over here, you can see there's these voice terminal switches. You can tell the phones not to ring. So I could set, number 1, this one to not ring. This could be like a receptionist or something. They are the only people answering calls. Anyway, you get the idea. So it's kind of weird. Let's dive into that Cisco config. I think I got it, actually. We're looking at the configuration of the 2821 that's hosting the IP phones. And I've set up a couple things called dial peers. And a dial peer is basically how you control what happens when it detects that a number has been dialed. So for example, I set up a dial peer for the POTS line, and it is pointing at port 000, which is the FXS port that our phone line is plugged into. And basically, anytime someone dials the number 200 on the phone numbers don't need to be the full however many we're used to, it's going to hit this port, this analog port. That's the IP phones going out. And then I've got another dial peer for the VoIP phones, the IP phones. And it's saying when anyone ever dials 10, a number that starts with 10, basically. So in our case on the bench, we've got 101 and 102. Hit this call manager. This thing is 10006, the IP, and just do what you normally would have done. So you already saw I have inter-IP phone calling already happening. I haven't tested this part. I think what's going to happen is we dial 101. We'll see on one of the Merlins, and we'll find out what happens. Let's try it out. Get ready for this. I'm going to dial 200 on the Cisco IP phone. Both Merlins ring. I can pick it up, and I have a call. I wonder if I can put us on speakerphone. Hello? Yeah, you can maybe kind of hear me coming over this speaker here. Wow. That's incredible. Okay, now this is what I haven't tried. Can I dial one of these? Something tells me it's going to be like way too easy. 101. Holy crap, it works. Okay, the dial peers are working. Okay, let's try just on the other phone just for fun. I'm in shock. That was so few configuration lines. I think my Ethernet jack fell out here. There we go. Okay, I'm going to dial 102. This is so cool. What do I do now? This is so cool. I did not expect to accomplish that so fast. So what we're going to do is immediately write out our config, small as it was. Yeah, and now I have the retro rack set up with IP phones. I've got the router in there permanently for the IP phones, so I can plug them in wherever I can get the inline power. And we've got the Merlin bridged to them. What do I even do now? I mean, I guess just for fun, let's try one of these fancier, newer phones. It's a little convoluted because they need regular PoE. So we got to put this little inline PoE, 48 volt PoE injector in because that inline power thing doesn't provide that. Let me hook all this up 1 second. It is coming to life, and you can see it's quite a bit newer. 07, Java powered. Though I bet those guys are Java powered as well, as was the style at the time. You gotta love that color screen though. Okay, let's let it do its thing. It takes a few minutes. She's up. Let's do my new favorite thing to do with these and call some Merlin phones. Works, of course. Man, this is so good. It's obvious to me, at least, that we need a IP phone dedicated to the server room. I don't know what it's doing off in the back there, where it's hard to get to. You'll have to talk to my IT guy about that. And then, of course, it'd be pretty nice to have a phone right here at the desk. Pick it up, call the server room, see what's going on. This, of course, is getting increasingly dystopic. I'm the only one down here. Now, there's a lot more to cover in future videos. These Merlins have these feature package modules that you insert right here, different cartridges that allow them, to do different things. Haven't even scratched the surface with these Merlins. I've also got these ridiculous Cisco Wi-Fi IP phones that I got working in another video. You can see this is extension 105, but they're pretty spotty. They barely work, if ever. So I think I need to do a software upgrade on the router, and we'll dive into that in a future video as well. And then of course on the IP phones, you can configure all sorts of stuff. You can set different custom backgrounds on these. You can change the ringtone. You can set up like a local directory structure, and you can navigate and take a look and search by name for all the different phones once you set that up on the router. A ton of stuff to dive into there. And the infrastructure never stops. I have the right side of this patch panel labeled and understood, but I haven't done the same exercise on the left side, and it's leaving a little bit to be desired. So I'll tackle that in the future. But that's going to do it for this video. I'm really happy with the progress because now I have the dedicated infrastructure in the rack. I can power that on and plug these things in. They used to just be hiding in boxes. That router was sitting on the floor. Now I'm in way better shape to experiment and play around with all of these phones. Wanted to throw it out there that I'm going to be at VCF Midwest this Saturday, September 13th, 2025. I'll be there all day, so if you see me walking around, definitely say hi and we'll have a chat. As always, I hope you enjoyed following along on this video. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. And I'm also on Patreon. I post behind the scenes type videos of what I'm tinkering with, and often that leads into a video on the main channel in the future. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.